Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning if you're joining us from outside of Europe. I'm so happy to be back today with the Adobe Live on Behance. I want to say hello to everyone who's joining us already from the live chat. Unfortunately, we as well, not really unfortunate, we do have a larger audience on YouTube. So if you do want to join the chat, join the YouTube channel right now so we can answer your questions, say hello to you, and meet all of your lovely virtual faces. I just want to say welcome to an amazing Adobe Live session that we're going to have today with my special guest, Carl Lomax.
Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, we have you from Scotland, Stirling. How are you today?
Yeah, not bad. We've got the sun out for once, so it's not too bad here today.
That's okay. That's good because I mean over here it's a bit gray, so it's good to know that we're working out for you guys.
Switched around for once, yeah.
Great. So Cal is a motion designer and an amazing young talent that is currently part of the Off Academy mentorship by Off Academy and Adobe. The program is for 7 months long. It's really a big opportunity for young talents from the age of 18 to 30 to join in. The subscriptions were open back in April, and we got to choose the 6 lucky winners in October to be mentored by 6 pro mentors during 7 months, where they will hopefully join us all together and off Barcelona virtually to present their final project. I know that Cal is part of the motion mentorship. We're very excited today to share his experience with you all and not just talk about the project he's currently creating, but also to share all the pro tips while working with the big motion design studio Tendril from Canada. Cal, please feel free to introduce yourself probably more properly than I did. I would love to hear more about you and more about the project you're doing. And yeah.
That's great. Thanks very much for the intro. So I've been with Chris and the Tendril team for a good number of months now. So Off Academy's been a huge undertaking in itself. My background has been doing interactive arts and different forms of media like that. And I moved towards motion design. And so through this project, I've really got to delve deep in with it. And so that's basically Chris and the team giving me all the sort of knowledge and little tips and tricks that they've learned on the way, and really just sort of showing me what it means to be part of this industry and to take it further. So yeah, these guys have been like giving me a lot of instructions and sort of guiding my way into the sort of career path. So it's really, really interesting, and I can't wait to show the actual final thing. But until now, we've got some work in progress just to show you on the way. So that'll be pretty fun. So I do have a small presentation, which will be great to just share with you guys. And yeah, we'll just walk through it. And if you have any questions or if there are any questions in the chat, just fire them mid-presentation. I'm happy to take them on, and we can stop and chat in between things. So yeah, let's get weird.
Amazing. Let's get weird. Let's see.
So yeah, as you said, I am in Scotland, sort of the cold streak area of the land, but it's fine and it is what it is. So we don't have a huge motion design community around here. We have some pop up in Glasgow and larger cities like Edinburgh, but it's quite a small niche bit up in Scotland. As for myself, these are kind of the taglines I use. I say I'm an artist, a motion designer, and then a mad scientist. And I kind of use that as part of my sort of tagline for everything, because I look at creativity as a bit of a mad science. Like, really, you pull from all strands of life and you put it together into a piece. And so that's kind of where like my mind's always went to, is like, this is where I draw my inspiration from. And so, yeah, I do motion and I do weird and quirky art pieces. So these are like some of the pieces I've done before. And I really like to just kind of push expectations of people and try out different techniques and try different things. And really, I'm still always learning. And I think that's the biggest thing you can ever take away is like, get rid of your ego. Like you're always going to learn something new. And I think the biggest thing you can ever do is just admit that, okay, that didn't work, but what if we do this instead? And you just keep reiterating things. So that's kind of just where I've been. And my past has been just sort of trial and error. And Chris has basically pushed me forward throughout this project to keep doing that.
So just to mention
Sure.
to everyone, Chris is the co-founder of Studio Tendril. We will be sharing the link of the portfolio in the chat right now, so you can get to know the studio in case you don't. So Chris is your mentor, right, Cal? He's been working with you for the past 4 months.
Yeah, sorry, that's correct. Yeah, Chris has been the mentor, but I mean, beyond Chris as well, there has actually been an immense amount of talent in Tendril who have also taken me on to be like, one workshops with me. So, beyond Chris, there's been like Leo, Joey, a song and all that as well, who've also chipped in at points. So really it has been Chris leading the pack, but then there has been all of Tendril behind it. So I really just got a big thanks to them. And yeah, it's been, I think 4 or 5 months now. Like time has flown by. It's amazing how quickly it goes ahead. So yeah, it's quite interesting to see how that goes.
Amazing.
And yeah, basically back onto like, where do my ideas come from? The project I've pitched towards Tendril and what got me into the Off Academy, brief summary, we all had to pitch a project and then submit them to the mentors, and they would pick out with Off Academy which one they wanted to pursue. I actually originally, and I've never shared this one with Chris or you yet, Natalie, I had another project I initially was going to share. And very last minute, I was speaking to a friend and he was like, why don't you submit the one you've always said you want to do? And I was like, I think it's just a bit too weird. And he's like, yeah, but if they go for it, then they know they like you, like what you do. And so very last minute, I switched the project around. I had a whole other one I'd prepared for you guys, and I switched it last minute. And I went, okay, no, I'll go with what is me. And I was like, okay, I'll go with one that's more true to what I do. And so that came down to the science and art thing. Yeah.
That's amazing. It's just like one of the things that I know that as creatives, we struggle with doubts and like, oh, maybe they would like that, maybe they won't. But in the end, you always have to trust your gut and just go with what really represents you. It's so good to know that. That's amazing. It's kind of like an advice for the future mentees for the
100%. Yeah.
program that we're going to launch this year. Amazing.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's one of those things. If I learned eventually that is like, I'm better to go ahead with what I want to do. It's happened actually a couple of times where I've went, no, I put my foot down. I'm going to do my project. I'm going to just pitch what I want to do. I've always kind of picked out things that are a little bit different than other people would pick out. And so my core inspiration has always came from this idea of scientific research meets artistic inspiration. So I kind of blend those two together. And that's where I get this sort of sense of wonder comes in. And it's just kind of one of those sort of fields where I think there's a voice I can put in there that others don't talk about. So yeah, the project I ended up pitching was around the concept of a Wunderkammer. And you might be thinking, oh, what the hell is that? It's basically, it's basically a collection of items and artifacts. Traditionally, it was more about sort of natural oddities and things. Sometimes they're completely fictional. You might have like a golden unicorn or something in these collections, and they just don't make sense. Or other times it's shells and it's skulls and it's something that's natural. But these were always weird and quirky objects. And as human beings, we've always had a weird fascination with like collecting things. Like I can see right now in your home, like you have a bunch of stuff behind you. It means something to you. And like, there's something weirdly interesting about why do you collect those things. So me and Chris have sort of spoke about this idea in this project, and he really loved the idea of where can you take this and what can you do with it. So the idea sort of stemmed on from that. This is a beautiful mugshot of both me and Chris just now. So just in case you forgot what my face looks like. So he basically taught me to take it from like this to this. And, like going back a step there, like these are some sketches that came out early on in the concept. And then these are sort of working style frames we've got to now. And you're probably like, how the hell do you go from that to that? Because I had no idea. Like, I was at this point completely lost. So I went in, I was like, here's my pitch, here's my project. And Chris was like, right, we're going to take this on as if it's one of our projects and show you straight the way through how the production works. So from start to finish, you'll know how it goes. So the very start point is basically pulling together all the inspiration, all these different sort of media, quotes, text, whatever it is where you get your inspiration from. And for me, that comes from a variety of things. So I, do read a lot of academic text at times, and I'm a big fan of Da Vinci's work and like Santiago Cajal, and a few other like sort of scientific heads who used to also delve into artistic sort of inspirations and look at things like that way. So yeah, like you start out with one sort of core concept and you build it up from there, and you go to the next stage and you start adding more boards to it. And then eventually you go even deeper and you have even more boards to it. And these aren't even where we're at now. There's still another probably half a board of this, which just came out of it. And I think Chris has been fantastic at guiding me through that process. He's basically stopped me and went, don't push forward yet, go back and get this bit right. And I think it's one of those things of you've got to keep, be willing to take a step forward and then step back when something's not clicking at that point in time. And don't be afraid to get something out, kick something away. If it's not working, let it go. Like, it will happen in another project. And I think he's been good at that, because there were sometimes I was like, oh no, this would be really cool. He's like, yeah, but you're not doing a 10-minute film here. Like, come on, like, we've not got enough time for that. So let's slow it down. And so it's kind of finding a balance. So, yeah.
That's one of the pro tips that we're gonna learn today, which is it is, I know that in your case, for example, you have a deadline to present the project, which is 7 months, right?
Yeah.
But it's always good, to always take step backs, because you never know that whether this idea might work or not, or whether, you want to change something in the project. So this is really an amazing tip for everyone that works in the creative field, in order to kind of like not struggle and just because we face so many challenges when we're working on a specific project. And I would like to kind of focus on the screenshot you have over here. I know that this is kind of like a system that Tendril introduced to you. So can you kind of like talk more or less about that, just to kind of understand?
No, totally. So this site's called Miro. It's free to access, I believe, and it's fantastic. There's basically a massive whiteboard, and so the way they go about it is they've got a little setup where they're like, okay, we start in this frame and you move on to the next board and the next boards. And they've actually got the point, like they've shared with me some of their sort of projects, and they've shown me their boards and the way they've built around things. And one or two of their recent projects, they've actually even had clients involved in these boards, so they can also pitch in and add some reference points that they want to add to it. And it really is basically, for me right now, it is primarily myself and a couple others that use this board. But with Tendril, this is something that, the whole team can get access to. And it's building a blueprint that you can then build your project on. So, you start out with your very core rough sketches, and then you say, okay, here's some images I like, this is the style I like. And you take that and then you slowly just sort of keep adding more to it and building up as you go. So you just build it down into basic blocks and just keep going and going and going until, eventually you have your final outcome. But they introduced me to this, and they've got a fantastic, that's it. Chris and that have been at this for years, and they kind of said, look, you're going to get like 20 years worth of knowledge here. It's going to be a lot,
Wow.
take a step and breathe. It's like, we've worked out all the kinks for you, so it'll be fine. Just, it's a lot to take in one go. And it has been, but it's one of those things of, you just got to keep pushing forward with it. And they've got it down to a fine art at this point. Like, they know exactly what they're doing. And it's one of those things of, as soon as I get passed on to somebody else, like, they've already said, oh yeah, I had a look at your art direction deck. I've had a look at this. I've had a look at that. And it's because I've got those things in place that people can then say, I know what you're doing for your project. Here's an idea of how you should go about it. I think it's being structured and organized in that way, still having the flexibility, but in having that structure really, really helps going forward in projects. If you have the baselines, you can't go wrong. If you can follow that direction, if you feel like, oh, I can't get this picture to look right, go back and look at your reference boards, your art direction, and you say, right, this is the style, the lighting's not matching. So I need to go back and work on my lighting again. And that's really how it goes. It's a back and forth. You build the blocks and then you use them to sort of build the rest of the project.
Amazing. And how many people would you say you're currently working right now with the Tendril team besides Chris, of course?
Day to day, it's primarily myself, Chris, and Yelena. Yelena's been doing this sort of project management side of this for me, and she has been a whiz on the schedule. So she's the one who comes in and says, right, have you hit it? No? Okay, right, well, let's rework and rejig things. And they've been really flexible in that part because they know myself. Like, I'm still learning a lot of stuff. A lot of the softwares and techniques and that are new to me still, or I was just sort of novice at before. So they were kind of like, right, we've built it in so we can do it as a modular timetable. We can switch things around. When things go well, we can move it forward a week. And if things are going a bit slower, then we budget back and forth. So there's been really, really good like give and take there.
Wow, I find it fascinating how well integrated you are with the team. Like besides you working on the mentorship project, you're like basically working with them as like, I wouldn't say an intern, but working directly with them. And like you said, you're getting so many years of experience. And I'm so happy to know that you're getting the most out of this opportunity. And we have some of the mentees here from the other mentorships, Audrey, Tony,
the gang's all here.
And of course, shout out to
hey
everyone.
Guys.
I just want to set a reminder for everyone. I know that we were live on YouTube chat, but please, the Behance chat is back on. So do join us on behance.net/live so we can say hello to you and have any questions that we can ask Cal over here. So yeah, please, Cal. Besides the way you are working on boards, what is like the current status right now of the project?
So currently the status right now is we're at the point where we've kind of went from the sort of storyboarding side of things. We've drawn up the boards and we've got sort of loose concepts all there. And we started to move towards animatic stage. So these are some sort of scenes where, very limited sort of texturing and materials and that going on, just trying to get framing right. And then we sort of moved on in the last couple of weeks towards style framework. So we moved from the animatic, sort of getting the block motions of, okay, what scenes have to be built into place. And now we moved on to sort of look dev. And as of like next week, we're going like gun-ho into the animating side of things, and things will really be starting to move properly. In the animatic stage, we really just kind of have the base thing to get across the idea of the movement. Instead of going into the nitty-gritty of things, you might have a single cube bouncing because it's easier to see, okay, I know what's happening there. And at the end of that day, it's actually a bird that's flying about, but you have to do something so you know which scenes you're building up. And that's something we're working on as well, is actually got like a shot breakdown list. So I can go through the list and be like, right, that shot's done. This one's in production. And that's a really good way of working as well, is I would recommend that if you're doing a project of your own or anything, break down the shots. If you've got 20 shots, you then know, okay, shot 2, 4, and 6 are done and the others aren't. You need to then look at, okay, why not, and where things are going in that direction. But yeah, we moved on to the look dev side like a couple weeks back. And that's when you start to get playful with things. And I've been posting some of this stuff as I've went, you really start to just get to play and sort of put your teeth into it. And then you just keep iterating. And that's something that I can't stress enough is, okay, you've done it, but then just keep going with it. Just do more to it. As Chris said to me before, he's like, just throw everything at the wall. He's like, just keep throwing as much as you can and see what sticks best. And then you do it again. And you just keep doing it. And each single one of these, I mean, there's probably about 100 of these images I've done at this point in time with just tiny micro details or like macro details on the crystals. And you just keep doing it more and more and more and more. And that's kind of the way you do it. You just have to keep building up and trial and error. And at some point or another, I just use like, right, make it as ugly as you can. Like, just break it. And so I did that. That was what some of the techniques I've got told as well. I was like, keep working. And if something breaks, take a step back and see, say, okay, that went wrong. And there's why, It's always about sort of taking 2 steps forward and 1 back, just to try and find the balance between what's working and what's not. And I think it's okay as well to admit, right, it's not working. I need to change it. And the more quickly you own up to that, and the more quickly you're honest about this isn't working, the faster you can then fix the problem. if you sit and you mull over it and you work on it for days and it's not working, it's not going to be any use to you in a couple of days' time when you go, it's not worked. And you're like, well, I could have spent that time, working on another side of it or trying it again or trying it from a different angle. And that's a big, big takeaway is like, don't ever feel like you're stuck with the one thing. With the animatic, we kind of built it so that that's your shots. So, basically you don't have to deviate from it. It's kind of like a really sort of loose line, but there are still bumps and kinks in it. There will be little bits that change from that point. And that's fine. The thing is, that's your core base, and you can sort of flex between back and forth with that, which is great. And that's kind of the way to do it, is you kind of just know when to give and take with these sort of things. And don't be afraid to say it didn't work. I think that's the biggest thing, is don't be afraid of that.
Yeah, it's just like one of the rules that, well, not really rules, but kind of like one of the steps that we go during a design process or work in progress, which is go as crazy as you can, do ugly things, just do everything. Put it all out there on the table or on your board or whatever it is, and then just take a step back and decide what works best. Or you might even not even figure it out. And I feel like what you're saying here is that don't struggle because you can't figure it out. It's just trust the pace. And I feel like from my own perspective, it's just that no time is ever wasted. Like, I feel you don't waste your time at all. Like, you do use your time, even if you don't do anything, or even if you think you're stuck, but you're not actually stuck. Your brain is like ongoing all the time, and you're getting inspired by millions of things around you. So that's really nice to hear. I'm just gonna throw in a question here, which is by Sandrine. What do you do when nothing seems to work and then you start to reach the deadline, which is in your case, Cal? I know that your deadline is end of April. So what kind of advice can you give for that?
I think at that point, just be honest about where you've got to, and like, don't be afraid to look at things and be like, right, what can I cut? If you can, if you're in the luxury position where it's your personal project, like myself, you look at things and go, right, okay, I'm not quite hitting this bit. What can be removed where I can still get the core concept of this piece out and stuff like that? And that's happened back and forth with this project already. Like, I mean, initially I went in and Chris was just like, no, we're not doing that length of time. We're not doing it at 4K. We're not doing this. He says, we don't need it. He says, just cut it down to the bare bones. And I think if you've got a deadline coming up, I mean, I remember even in university, like I had this, I went to GSA, Glasgow School of Art, and we had deadlines constantly for different projects. And it's one of those things of, I remember there was one time in my first year, it got to a couple of days before and the project wasn't working. And I had to bite the bullet. And I do not recommend you do this every time, but I did bite the bullet and I had another idea. And I just completely redid the project in a couple of days over the 2 weeks that I had, because that was better than slinging a dead horse down the line. It was kind of that way if it wasn't working. And I think if you're getting your deadline, just be honest about, do you need to have X, Y, Z in it, or can you remove the Y in that factor? And just don't give up as well. Like, one of those things that it's really easy to just sort of say, oh, it's not working, I've given up, whatever else. Like, just own it. Like, own failing as well. Like, there's nothing wrong with something not working. Go up and fail with a smile on your face. I believe that was something I heard in a TED Talk, actually, or not TED Talk, a podcast the other day, actually, was like, smile when you're failing. It was one of those things of like, yeah, just own it. Don't be afraid to say something's not worked, and just say what you learned. I remember in university, I was also bad for apologizing that something didn't work. And I got called out by my tutor. He's like, you're not allowed to apologize anymore in any of your presentations. I was like, okay. And I did that. And all of a sudden I realized the way I started speaking was, so this didn't work, but what I did learn was this. And you start looking at the positives, look at what you have learned and what you have got to. And just, don't be afraid of deadlines in the sense that, pressure's on, whatever else. Like, you've done what you can. And if you're in a client situation, you have to be honest with the client at that point. You have to be really honest. And, maybe you've bitten off more than you. That's a difficult conversation to have, but it's better to be honest about that than try and, get away with it, because it's never going to end well. And personal projects, just look at where you can sort of scale them back and forth, 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
These are very amazing insights, Cal. I hope that, everyone will be using that in their own projects or in their own career hunt, because I know that this also applies to because I know that many young talents here, or even like not young, it's just talents in general that are also looking
Yeah.
for some career insights. And I feel like these advice also apply to that. Like don't just be afraid of failure. And it's not really failure if you get rejected or just kind of like feel stuck in your in hunting for something that you've always wanted to do, because in the end you have to trust the process, and like you said, put a big smile on your face, and just face it as it is, and nothing will last forever, as cheesy as it sounds.
Yeah.
So just getting back to these amazing renders that you have here, I know that some of the audience would be interested to hear about what softwares are the pros using, such as like
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, they're using a bunch of stuff, and like I'm using like a fraction of what they touch on in Tendril. But for me, primarily, I've been working within Cinema 4D. That's been my kind of go-to for a couple of years now. I've always been on the cusp of sort of 3D stuff, and I've been in and out of it. I know my way around. But these guys have really basically went, here's the hood under the car. Let's go have a proper look at this and deep dive into it. So that's what's been really fun. So I've been using Cinema. We have also been rendering within Redshift, which is a third-party plugin render software. So we use that over Octane because that's just generally what they go to, and they've got a nice tie-in with other sort of pieces. And I'm also using like After Effects and Photoshop naturally as well. These are all raw renders. They've came straight out from Cinema 4D with just Redshift and a little bit of post. But these are just from there. And I mean, other than that, I've also been using some Substance Painter, which is another Adobe software. So Adobe also has Substance Designer and Substance Painter, and they basically allow you to paint on 3D objects and sort of really texture them up. So I've been using that for little bits and pieces as well. So those are kind of the main ones I've been using. Also, even simple as like Procreate as well. If you've got an iPad, Procreate or Photoshop on your iPad. I did my sketches in Procreate and like Photoshop. Like they don't have to be glorious sketches. They can be very, very basic, but you can also do some amazing stuff in them. So it's kind of, they really use everything. And another big one that people are starting to move towards now is like Unreal Engine and sort of real-time renderings. And they've started to delve into that a bit in places. And they sort of, personal projects. That was something that I got to see within the creative talks they do. So, I usually every Friday or every couple of Fridays, all of Tendril get together, and we like one or two people will present something or show their personal projects. And quite a few of the guys in there sort of touched on using like new pieces of software or trial and error with like Unreal or different techniques in cinema. And that's kind of where we are. It's one of those things of, I don't think there's anything that rules you out from trying your hand at different things, but it does help to kind of know your field and just kind of pick out one or two you can go, okay, I'm comfortable in this now. I can do X, Y, Z. But yeah, it's really an amalgamation of a bunch of different pieces together.
Amazing. I love these renders. It looks like a golden unicorn cone or something. Amazing. I love it. And then I have a question from Kizar. I hope I'm saying your name properly, Kizar. Sorry if I'm not, but he's asking, do motion designers have a role in film? And I feel like this is a great question for you because you are working on a film, on your first animated project. So what is your perspective on that?
It's an interesting one because I mean I'm still learning all the little details between what's this title mean and what's that title mean. Motion designers typically in film, I think, usually end up being a bit more involved within sort of title cards at the beginning and end. So if you ever see those beautiful like sort of end credits and stuff like that, those are usually the motion designers will kind of touch their hands on that a bit more. But motion designers can totally work in film as well. You could be a motion designer because motion designers usually work within some VFX. I've done some of that in the past with green screening and things. And then you also do 3D renderings and 3D modeling. Like my film is my first 3D film, as it were. And it's just a short piece, but it's fully 3D. And, if I can do that, there's nothing to say that I can't then step into a role in a film that requires those same skills. I think it's quite interesting. Like, I use motion designer over motion graphics for me, because I would say that I'd say motion designer is a wee bit more of a broader term than motion graphics is typically. But again, it's one of those things of really, it's kind of a generalist role as much as you make it. You can delve into so many different aspects, and film is definitely one of them. It's just, I think the only difference is the production type as well, is, for doing TV productions and stuff like that is very, very different than film. So I think if you're going down those different routes, you have to explore how they approach it differently. I think that's one of the big things you need to learn. But totally, really, there's place for a motion designer anywhere, the same way there is for an animator on any side of it. There'll be times you see films that really require that sort of eye and technique, and there'll be times we see a commercial that really requires it. So yeah, there's really a generalist role. You can jump in wherever you like.
Awesome. And should we look more into the amazing things that you're doing currently with Tendril, and maybe hear some portfolio tips that we got from Chris?
Sure. So eventually you get onto, like, this is a closer to final render of basically where the piece is going. And you kind of get to the point you're like, okay, like, I'm happy with this. It's finally, like, you can give it the thumbs up, you can go ahead with this, and you're quite happy. And then you go back to iterating again. And that's kind of the thing, is you just go back to keep trial and error. And so we're at the point where we've kind of started to frame up how shots should be and got them sort of lit and textured the way they should be. For me, I'm going for a very Rembrandt style, like window light, sort of very moody tones. And so that's kind of the direction you push it and you push it and you keep trying to pull it out from, and eventually get to like more frames like this. And you basically keep doing that over and over. And so we've got to that point now. And now's the fun part where we finally get to bring it to life by adding the motion. And so we're swinging right into that, like this week and into next is full on animating side of things. And already there's some pieces in place, but now is the time to basically, we've got the look there and we've got the pieces there. Now it's just to make it move and bring the life into the piece.
Beautiful. And can you talk a bit more about the inspiration behind Cabinet's Curiosity? Like, I'm seeing here some elements. Maybe you could talk about these elements that you chose specifically, and what was actually Tendril's opinion about these, and how much were they involved in the selection of the items?
Sure. Okay. So for me, it kind of was, going back to that sort of Miro board look at things, it really is like a full-on, cauldron of stuff. There's just so much there. There's like a crucible of just so many things going on in there. And it's that way of, I had to filter it down to what works and what doesn't. And so I kind of derived to the objects naturally myself, but they were a constant back and forth with Chris about how would this work. And the large amount of times I was Chris, like, it's your thing, you're ready. I don't want to put words in your mouth. So it's one of those things as well. I think there was a little bit of a hands-off approach in that stage, because it has to come from me. And I think otherwise the project doesn't make sense. If it's not, if you're not invested in it, there's no point in pushing forward with it. So for me, it kind of delved into, there's 5 thematic realms is what I've sort of dubbed it. That's not a technical term. It was just the best one I came up with. And so I kind of looked at the idea of the Cabinet Curiosity and how it always encompassed a bunch of different objects and a bunch of different ideas. It's something I've always been drawn to, and I just kind of like the fact that it's one step towards art, but it still has a sort of scientific underlying sort of tone to it, which I find fascinating, because I think there's just so many topics there that people are just a bit too afraid to engage with. And I feel like it's a way to open up conversations about more complex topics and more interesting sort of things to talk about there. So I used that, and I looked at this, and then I sort of derived 5 core points. So I'm looking at sort of botanical scenes, sort of minerals, and then I'm looking at skulls, and then I'm looking at fungi, and then I'm looking at sort of man-made objects, and basically looking at how I can utilize all those sort of different themes into sort of core hero shots, as it were, or like core objects that can then be pulled into the piece. And it's give and take to which ones are staying, which ones go. It's one of those sort of things of, there's been a lot of decisions of whether that skull's the right skull, whether that flower looks right. It's silly things, but those tiny details really, really make the difference. And even within the production lineup as well, the way Chris was talking, like, it's the tiny things. The thing that you always notice is the tiny details, and people who appreciate your work notice those points. So it's always important to look at basically, why is that there, and is it important that you have that there? Is it taken away from the piece, or is it adding to the piece? So yeah, that's kind of like where it sort of broke down into, was those sort of 5 core groups, and then they've been sort of filtered into how do we make that a wee bit more weird and interesting for a piece. So that's kind of where that went to.
Amazing. And that makes me would like to ask you, like, I know that virtually and having these Zoom meetings could be kind of tricky, but you're learning these amazing tricks from Chris, even though he's from Canada and you're in Scotland.
Yeah,
So
totally.
you have like how can you explain about your experience and kind of show the world that it is possible to work via online?
Oh, totally. And I think the other thing is as well, particularly within sort of creative industries, there's a large amount of people who do work remotely naturally anyway. So there's always been a little bit of that there. And I think the world's now just had to sort of catch up to speed a little bit. And for me, I'm based in Scotland and Chris is based in Toronto, Canada. So there was never really going to be a day-to-day meet up for a coffee and chat about the project. But it's totally easy to just set up a live stream. I mean, Chris will share his screen and show me some tips, or we'll just do a quick Zoom meetup, whoever else. We use sort of instant messaging like Slack every day to stay in touch, and sometimes it's important pieces and sometimes it's like a little nod of being like, oh, have you seen this thing? This is interesting. And yeah, it's totally possible. For me, largely my motion design skills have been self-taught. And so they have came from looking at likes of YouTube videos and tutorials and following online courses anyway. There's like a huge volume of stuff there. So there's never really been a problem of learning remotely or learning through digital means for this kind of work for myself. And but it's definitely one of those things that is different. I was initially at one point going to go over to see Chris wherever during this time frame, but with the state of the world, it's not a go at the moment, but eventually one day we will. And when we do, it'll be sort of one of those things of a weird experience to actually work in person, because really to do this sort of work, you don't require to be with the other person, but the important part is the studio aspect and the people you talk to. And I mean, they've been fantastic at moving very quickly onto the digital platforms using Slack and using Zoom calls to do regular meetups and regular creative talks to keep people inspired and keep people doing things. And I think it's one of those things of that's really been the core aspect of it, is that every day I get a check-in with them and they're like, hey, what are you up to? And just a little nudge to be like, hey, let's talk about this for 5 minutes quickly, and on you go. And it's just, that's the way it would be in a studio as well. If you're sitting next to somebody, they would do the same thing. So for me, it's been really fortunate that Chris has had the time to give me those 5 minutes, because those 5 minutes mean the world to someone who's just started out, whereas him, it's nothing. So
that's amazing to know. And it's kind of like proof that, either ways we are in a situation right now where we can't be physically together, but it's just proof that if you find the right method to work via digitally or even like in an office, anything is possible. I do have a question from Taylor here. She's asking, how do you get an idea for something like this one, for example, like your project, and how do you turn it into something tangible that you can put forward as a project proposal, which I think you kind of talked about it in the beginning. Sure. And it kind of like relates to my question as well, like why motion design?
That's okay. So for me, like motion design came out from I was fortunate enough, like I said, to go to university and try a bunch of different things. And I got into 3D a little bit there, and I suddenly just realized it was for me. I kind of felt like all of a sudden it was adding something more. I like to kind of use all the senses, and just being able to make movement or have life going on in a piece really kind of just caught my attention. And I think there's so much storytelling you can do in that. And I just love being able to tie into those sort of different fields and so many topics you can touch on. For this project particularly, it's straight up, it's a personal, it's very like, okay, I just really like this stuff, so I want to do a piece on it. Then that's fine. Sometimes you do that. For me, it kind of to pitch the idea, though, it was the very initial proposal document, which I sent to you guys, and Chris and the team, was basically you collect, go into Pinterest, go to Google Images, wherever you can, find the imagery you're looking for, find some of your old stuff perhaps as well if you have it, and you condense it into like an art direction like document, so a pitch deck, and then you would hand that over to a client or to you guys. Excuse me. And yeah, they would go through the images and you describe the piece, as it were. So I did a very brief synopsis of, I wanted to work on something that's sort of between the sort of science, like fantasy and science, sort of Frankenstein area. That was kind of where I was going. And if you can merge those two together and have a bit of quirky movement to it and things like that, that was basically what I pitched. So I pulled out imagery of things I'd made before, along with things that I aspire to make, and basically went, this is the kind of, where I am, this is where I am, this is where I want to be. And you describe describe the process, describe the best you have, give as much as you have towards someone of like, oh, here's the idea. For me, I've always been quite fortunate that I come up with too many ideas. So like I have a long list in the sketchbook of like things to get to eventually. I think anyone who's creative eventually does have one of those sketchbooks of projects or things that they thought they should do at some point. And this was kind of top of my list. So I'm very fortunate that I got to work on this with Chris and Tendril, particularly because like they know this stuff. This is their bread and butter. They know how to do this really well. So they basically are just making sure that, okay, it hits the mark. I get to get there, even if it's 30 seconds of amazing work. He's like, it's 30 seconds of amazing work. He said, we're going to get that out of you, and we're going to get as much as we can out of it. So yeah, that's kind of like where it came from, I guess. If that answers the question, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, it's so nice to see like how much freedom you have working with such a big team, like Studio Tendril. Would you like to show us more of your presentation just to see where you're at right now?
Well, yeah, these are kind of the frames I've got to at this point in time. So these were what I was showing. So really, it has just this is the point where things have kind of ended, and we're now moving on to this animation stage. So at this point in time, this is where we are at. So within all these things, though, I think it's the important thing is to break it down. It's like when you look at these images and the ones that came previously, like there's a huge jump between them, and it's one of those things of that feels like a big jump, but it's actually just so many micro things that have to be touched upon. Like I said before, I'm rendering within Redshift and doing the materials and texturing and all that through Redshift now, which is something I'd touched on before, but I hadn't been fully involved in. So like every little scratch, every little detail and stuff like that, Chris has basically been pushing me to be like, okay, if you're going to add that, why is it there? What should you add? Grunge it up a bit, tone it back. He's like, everything's got to be for a purpose. And this is basically, when you break it down, every wall has a little bit of like a roughness to it, or it's got a little bit of a sheen to it. Every little thing has naturally got a bevel to it. And so there's tiny, tiny little things that suddenly make images go from like flat like this to sort of popping a bit more like this sort of area. And so I think it really has been, that's where we have got to. And then now with the animatic in place, we're now sort of flinging into the full-on animating side of things. So we're taking these hero ones, the cameras are there, and now it's the fun part where we get to add on the sort of creepy, crawly motions and things like that to it. So that's basically next step, and it's coming right around the corner, and it's coming at me fast. So that's basically where we're heading, all steam, all steam ahead sort of thing. We're going right into it. So right now, this is kind of the collection of things that we are. There's a couple more frames that are just coming out today. One of the things with 3D is you have to be prepared for render times and things like that as well. So as much as the deadline for me is in so many weeks, there's actually, knock two weeks off of that, because you have to leave the computer to basically print the image, as it were. So really, it's kind of one of those sort of things of you just have to get things right and get things iterating very quickly so that you can get them out, and then trial and error with them. So yeah, right now it's going on to the animating side of things, where things will start to come to life a bit more, and that will be what we show off it off.
Wow. And what about the animation side? Are you nervous about that?
Yes and no. It's one of those things of I'm quite comfortable with a lot of areas, but then there's some very niche techniques. I went to Chris being like, I really like this thing you did, and he's like, right, well, that's really complex. Let's break it down into what's actually achievable at this time. So again, like they have been so helpful with that. And there was their recent ESPN video. If you've not seen it, I highly recommend you go watch that new trailer they did. It's so beautiful with the way they've done it. And there's so many techniques. And that one's basically a full-on collage of things. So they've got a bunch of different sort of things going on in there. People have collaged together with this piece for that piece. And a couple of the guys who were really kind, and I've pointed out a couple of frames. They're like, right, you really like this one? Well, here's the project for it. So I've got to deep dive into their projects, like for a couple of their project scenes. Like here's an example of them. Like just the basic, not the full-on production ones, but here's the example of how we came about that. And he's like, this is the technique. Take it and break it. I was like, it's one of those things of take it and work out backwards of how you do these things. It's like, oh, this is how we would do that sort of stuff. That's really interesting. And obviously, full on NDAs, can't disclose too much, but there has been bits and pieces I've been privy to where it's been fantastic to get that site under the hood. And, just really get to see how they build things. And I think that was the thing, is it's all about being structured and organized within teams such as Tendril when it's so large. Chris has been very quick to be like, the first thing you learn about is organization. Like in your project, this is how we do it. And he's like, this makes it clean and it's easy. If you hand that off to whoever else, they'll be able to open that file and do exactly what they need to do. And I think it's really important if you're going to be moving on to motion design or any kind of team-based projects like that, where you're sharing large files and large projects like that, really important to basically make sure that other people can understand it. Because at the end of the day, it's not just you working in it. And with Nintendo, there could be 5, 10, however many people working in this one scene. And so they need to all be able to know what's going on. And that's kind of really important to learn.
Amazing. That's such good advice for everyone, right? Because I can imagine, because you're new in the field, but you did already work in motion design, but now you're learning all these tips from Chris. Would you kind of share your favorite pro tip from Tender that you can not only apply into this project, but also in the future?
Sure. I'm thinking, put me on the spot. I think for me, it's one of those things of the biggest bit of advice that I could give from it, to anyone, and beyond just actually in motion design, this applies to life in general, is be true to you. And that's one thing that Chris has always sort of been pushing, and Tendril are really big on this, is be honest about what you want to do and be honest about what you're doing. And if you put out the truest version of you, people will come. I believe that's actually from Chris's mentor, Bruce Mao. He mentored with him years and years back, and they got on really well. And Chris is now getting to sort of do that for me. And biggest thing is, like I said at the beginning, when I said there was initially another project I was going to give you guys, and eventually no, I'll give you the one that's me. It's one of those things of, if you put out what's you, good things will come from it. You just have to keep doing it. And they're now at the point where they're really excited, because Tendril was sort of saying that it's got to the point where people know what Tendril do now, and they get to enjoy that. People come to them for what they do. And I think if you keep doing pieces or bits of work that aren't true to yourself, aren't true of what you want to do, then it's going to show, and you're never going to get quite the same enthusiasm for it. I can show you a really grotesque looking skull or whatever, and you might not like it, but if I can talk enthusiastically about it, you'll know that I love this thing and it means something, and I'll be able to show my passion for that. And I think it's important you show that sort of thing throughout it. So yeah, be true to yourself when you're doing these sort of projects, and be true to what you want to put out there. If you've got a portfolio and you don't like this piece, don't have it there. It's one of those things, if you don't want to do that sort of work, if you don't want that as a job, if you don't want to do logo design, it's great to have a little example to show you can, but don't make your whole portfolio based around logo design then. Be honest about, if you want to do illustration, put more illustration in your portfolio. If you want to do 3D stuff, put more 3D stuff in it. Really just, be true to what you want to do, and, put that out there in the world.
Totally agree with you. And I know that here we have the people, so many people on the chat that are loving your advice and your insights. So thank you so much for sharing. I just want to remind everyone we have around 10 minutes left to wrap up the session. So if you do have any questions for Cal and kind of want to know how it is like to really work inside a studio, please do let us know. So Cal, I would also like to ask, is there something that I know that, of course, there are many challenges because you are learning new things. But is there this one thing that's kind of like you feel like you're failing at, or you're still like struggling with? Would you like to share that with us
Uh,
today?
yeah, sure.
It's like, one of these silly interview
Sure.
sessions,
No, 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 yeah.
but at least,
If I'm completely frank, I think the thing I struggle with the most is actually been doing those like promo videos and sending the footage to yourself. You've probably got 100 takes of me screwing up lines over and over again. I think honestly, being on camera and being open and like willing to talk about things has been a sort of big challenge in itself. So there's been that, but day to day, project wise, I think for me it was just kind of learning what's achievable a little bit. I kind of always have had that sort of thing, and it's better to, like I said at the start of this project to Chris, is like I want to aim for here. As like, but I know full well we're probably going to scale back to here. But if I didn't aim for there, then maybe I would never even got to the step below that. So for me right now, it's just been just trying to get understanding everything that's going on, because there's been so many micro details in this. Like there is full on art direction, like he's like, I'm directing this film, I'm pulling together an art direction for it. I've done sort of 3D stuff for it. I've been, setting up the camera work for it. I've been, trying to learn how to texture things so they look physically accurate as well, not just abstract. So even that in itself is sort of, looking at sort of photography references and pulling them all together and trying to pull them together. So I think really the biggest limitation is just time and myself of like, it's looking at things and being honest with yourself. Am I going to hit that mark? No. And if I'm not going to hit the mark, just be willing to, take that step back and reiterate and try things again. I think that's been the biggest struggle, is just looking at what's actually achievable for one person. A lot of the references I've given Chris has been fantastic. He's like, oh, I love this reference. Remember, there's like 5 people worked on that, or 10 people worked on that. And he's like, you're one, So I think it's one of those things of just being able to, look at yourself and be like, what do I really need in this? What's really important to me? And being willing to let go of some other aspects that are maybe a bit too complex or a bit too out there for like, one person to manage to achieve, particularly with the skill sets as well. Like you said, I'm still learning a lot. And, I would say that I'm still, very junior in my career. And it's one of those positions where you have to be willing to learn a lot and learn from wherever you can and whoever you can. For me, my biggest thing has always been that I'm never going to say I'm the absolute best in 3D. There'll be somebody who's 12 right now who'll do fantastic stuff that I'll never be able to understand because they've been working at it for 6 years since they were 6. But the thing is, I would love to work with them, and I would love to work with and learn from the best folk. It's one of those things of be willing to look at and realize your strengths, your weaknesses. And I think that's been the sort of biggest thing. I've just been aware of what I've maybe tripped up on and where I need to work on things, and just going back and forth, reiterating again, just trying to work on stuff over and over, and just be willing to fail, I guess, really.
Yeah, willing to fail. I love that. Yeah, just have the will to fail. It's okay. I don't even see it as a failure, but and we also have here, I'm just gonna use that last question today before we wrap up the session. Taylor is asking if Tendril helped to create any of the work. I mean, obviously besides their tips, but did they actually help you, like literally help any of the work, or they're just like kind of like giving you tips and coaching you through your journey, through your self-discovery journey?
Sure. No, they've been involved basically in every section of it, straight through from initial sort of inspiration posts where I started that mural board and I'm posting a bunch of inspiration. Chris will go, here's an interesting video. These guys did interesting work. And he would throw that in there for that stage, right through to the story beat stage where you start to get the sort of like pacing of the film in place and the little bits and pieces where it's okay, we're going from a slow build to medium to a drastic climax and then drop off. Those every single step, somebody's been there. Every single step of the way, somebody in Tendril has came in and went, let's talk about it. So I would pitch basically where I'm at with it, and then they would basically give their insight, and just instead of like pushing in a direction, it's very much more of like a, here's a little bit of a nudge, just as in like, this stuff's really interesting, maybe look at it more. I mean, one example for that is that, me and Chris can talk about so many things, and then the whole stuff with NFTs and like digital curation came up in the last couple of months, and it has a really interesting impact, like on my piece, which is all about curation. And there's little topics and things just come up when you're chatting, and that kind of makes the difference. So yeah, they've really been, every single step of the way, there's been some form of input from them. Not necessarily, but like I've said, not pushing it so that it goes in their direction. Very much I'm in control of it, but they are just there to support, and they really are like, if you're not getting this, here's a couple ideas, maybe this will help. And that's this our give and take with it for the last few months. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Cal, for this beautiful session today. I enjoyed the chat, enjoyed it, and I'm sure that it's going to help thousands of people that are going to watch it again. It was wonderful having you. I'm so happy to see all the development that you're doing during your mentorship, and we can't wait to see your final project in May.
Can't wait to show you.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's been wonderful having you as a guest. I want to remind everyone that we do have a Discord channel. So if you do want to keep the chat and ask more questions, you have the link over here. Join us on Discord, Adobe Live UK. We are live on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Just a reminder for you all to join us next week. On Monday, we have the amazing Rachel Presky and Maddie, who will be showing us how to go from illustration, from fresco to animation. And on Wednesday, we have a masterclass that is, I'm going to keep as a surprise. We don't know if we can mention that yet, but stay tuned to see who are the amazing guests. And then on Friday, we have all about YouTube channels and how it works with Joe, Alam, and Sophia. Always from 12 to 1 UK time. It would be amazing to see you all again over there. Have an amazing Friday, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. Big virtual hugs, and see you on Monday, everyone. Thank you, Cal. Take care.
Thanks very much.
Bye.